This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 337. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about EA ending work from home, Bungie stole art again, Jade Raymond is leaving her studio again, and much more. So this week was it was interesting. I think something I saw was a report and some posting about EA has more employees now than they did a year ago, by about 800. And that's really interesting because EA has done multiple rounds of layoffs as recently as a few weeks ago. That really goes against the whole narrative about EA, right? That they're cutting all these employees to cut costs and do all these other things, which they're certainly doing to a point. But having more employees than you had a year before is not what you would expect, because all of the conversation is about the layoffs, firings, moving people around without their permission or whatever. And it just reminded me how often I don't think we do a very good job as a gaming community, but especially on the media side of things, of looking at the whole picture, realizing that yes, the layoffs suck. Veteran workers getting kicked is bad. Losing that experience and all of that is a bad thing. People who have relocated or who have been at places for more than a decade, losing their job sucks, right? But it's sometimes kind of the sky is falling situation where I don't think people always fully look around and realize, yeah, they did lay off 500 people, but they hired 1,300 people. And the ploy there is obvious, right? Like, I'm sure over at BioWare, a bunch of those devs who have been there for like 15 plus years, the writing staff, was probably making pretty good money. If you ever look and see what some of even the entry level jobs in game dev, what they start off at, they're pretty solid wages. Now, for the work they do, for the skill set that they have acquired, the money that took, the experience and time that took, it probably isn't that great. But to a normie like me, I look at how much they get paid compared to what I get paid for the type of job I have. It looks pretty good. So I'm sure those veteran people, a decade plus, are probably making extremely good money. And you fire those people, and they fired those 500. They laid off those 500 people, or did things to make them leave, and then hired 1,300. Say that's the number. I'm kind of making it up. They're probably paying all those people way less that they hired. There's a really good chance they did save money in there. I also don't know how it works with contract workers and all that. I don't know if they're counted, but for me, it was just a moment of realizing that, because if you have asked me, hey, do you think EA has more employees now than they did a year ago? I'd say, of course not. They've laid a ton of people off. BioWare has like half of the devs it used to have. And even though a lot of those people didn't get fired, they still got moved around, and some of them have left. Yeah, of course they've lost people. They fired all these people at Activision or at Respawn, things like that. And that's not what happened, actually. So, yeah, it's just kind of a lesson. This is in no way at all defending those actions and the things they did. And I still think it's really good to focus on layoffs and things like that. But it just, little things like that, little factoids like that, just remind me that, it's easy to kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit and to not remember entirely what we're doing here. Okay, let's get into the gaming news. We're going to kick it off with more EA conversation. EA is moving to bring developers back into physical locations and getting away from work from home. So basically a communication went out to, seems like, all EA employees this week. I'm recording this on the 16th of May. And the reporting on this has been EA nixes work from home or whatever. That isn't entirely true. I will say it's pretty convoluted when I was reading through the content of the actual email. Now, actually, what I read through was a response from EA to IGN clarifying the actual things that are changing and all of that. I imagine it's essentially a copy and paste of what they sent the employees. But regardless, from what I gathered, the goal is to get everyone in 3 days a week to their office. There's a bunch of little details though. From what I could tell, right now it's only going to apply to people who live within 30 miles of their studio. And people outside of that will be able to continue doing what they've been doing. My guess is, my assumption from reading through this is that they're going to get as many people who currently work there to switch over to this. And then everyone they hire from here on out, it'll be like assume that you'll be moving where your studio is, and all of that. Now, obviously, what this comes from is COVID. There was remote work before COVID, but it seems like the norm back then that they're trying to get back to was that if I got hired at Ubisoft Montreal, or whatever studio and wherever, that I would move there within a certain amount of time, and then that's where I would live. I know a ton of people who work at Ubisoft's Massive in Malmo, Sweden, who aren't from there. They moved there and they picked up their lives and their families and left their families behind and went there, and now they've been there for years, right? And I'm not defending that practice, right? Like, I understand that during COVID, especially, all these game companies discovered, oh, we can hire people from anywhere and they can just work from home. We can set up security protocols and set up, ways of meeting, doing meetings and collaborations and all this stuff. And it seems like they got pretty good at it. We've had multiple games come out now that at least began or ended development, work from home entirely. And I'm sure, a few games have come out in the last few years that were developed entirely work from home. Obviously, that's not what EA wants to keep doing, and they aren't the first ones. I believe 2K, Rockstar, Ubisoft, I want to say Activision, a ton of studios have already done this. It's just EA seems to have the ultimate EA bad kind of label right now. So they're getting a lot of flack for what they've done. And that's fine. I get it. It's been really interesting seeing the developer reaction on Twitter, pretty non-existent because a lot of EA devs aren't on Twitter anymore. But I think it was over on Blue Sky where I follow a bunch of them. There was a lot of having nothing to do with any current news, and then, just tearing into, this idea of getting people to pulling people from work from home and all of that. I think I'm not a game dev, just straight up. And I don't know what it's like to make a game. The job I have is a pretty isolated job. I work from home 3 days a week. And the 2 days a week I don't work from home, I only have to go into the office for a short time. So it's pretty sweet. I also work a job that is very driving based, like outward, doing meetings out in the community and things like that. It makes sense. Basically 0% of my job is collaborative, or less than 5%, we'll say. With gaming, with game development, it doesn't seem like that is the same, to the point where I would say that the average game development job requires a lot of collaboration. And like I said, from the game devs I've talked to, even from the articles and stuff I've read, it seems like they've found solutions to a lot of those issues. Whether it be it Zoom meetings or ways of being able to, work on test builds and stuff like that of games, at the same time, or they figured out a lot of these issues, right? But it also seems from the people I've talked to, and it's very generational, it seems like, that there is definitely a vanguard, probably lots of the leadership in many of these studios, who has that old school belief of, people need to be in the office together, doing that collaboration or shooting the shit together, or just having that like human contact where you can argue and you can, show someone something immediately. Like, hey, come over to my desk and see this thing I'm doing. While a whole other set of people, and I've heard both sides of this, are saying, no, we've figured this out. It works. even like I remember with Dragon Age: The Veilguard, that was a game that I believe was in large part developed remotely. And then after the game came out a few weeks or months later, they did like a big meeting at their location, at their headquarters or whatever, where everyone did come in, and or at least a lot of people got to come in and meet everyone. You know, you have to think that, you know, you could have easily worked on Dragon Age: The Veilguard for 4 or 5 years and never met most of the people you were working with until after it came out and all that. So I'm pretty mixed on this. I know for my job, work from home works extremely well, and it's, you know, very useful. I can also see, I could hear an argument for why this makes sense to do. One of the big pushbacks on it, and it's definitely the case where I work, is that a lot of this is just these companies being mad that they're paying leases or whatever, property taxes or whatever, on these offices, and that they've, you know, spent tons of money on retrofitting and, you know, filling with furniture and technology and all this stuff, and that they just want to justify that again. I don't know if there's like any tax implications or, you know, things like that. That's beyond my pay grade. But I mean, I know with my work, the main reason they wanted people to come back, it seems, was that, you know, less than 6 months before COVID happened, they did a multi-million dollar renovation of our main office building, and the whole point was to shut down a bunch of satellite locations, offices, and bring everyone to this one huge office. And they spent a ton of money renovating that huge office, and they sold off all of those satellite offices literally in the months leading up to COVID. Then we were all gone for 2 years, and then it seems like a pretty big argument, or at least part of why they wanted to bring us back into the building, was to justify that cost. They were pretty fair about what they did, and no one, or very few, if any, people in my building moved there from overseas to come work for us and stuff like that. It's mostly local people, anyways. So it's, you know, not exactly the same situations, but I don't know. I think it's an evolving situation. We'll see what happens. I guarantee we're going to see a lot of, I don't want to say a lot. We'll see some turnover from this. I think you'll see, this is one of those things where everyone's going to stomp their feet and yell, and the vast majority of people are just going to go with it. Especially because, at least from what I saw, for existing employees, they're being pretty relaxed about how they're doing this. That could change. That may be temporary. Maybe I read it wrong. I don't know. But I suspect moving forward, we're going to see a lot more stories of people getting a job and moving to that studio, be it in another part of the country or another country and things like that. So we'll see how it plays out. And I hope that for anyone impacted, that you either find a better situation for yourself, or that you're able to, you know, take care of business. So good luck to everybody. Not good luck to Bungie or Marathon. They have been caught using stolen art from a unaffiliated artist in various parts of Marathon, their new game, including the menus and the UI and such. This is the fourth time Bungie has been caught doing this in the last 4 years. The previous instances were with various bits of Destiny 2 advertising and things like that. It's weird, man. This is really strange. This is not what Marathon needed, this bad press, after it had kind of what I perceived as a very lukewarm reception in its testing. This isn't what they needed. I played Marathon. I thought it was interesting, but as an extraction shooter guy, someone who's played thousands of hours of Tarkov, and who also at the same time was playing Arc Raiders, another upcoming extraction game, and has played, the Division survival mode and all that. It just has no juice, in my opinion. It is all style, zero substance to me. And now we find out that style was, at least in small part, not even their own, was stolen. Now they've responded to this and said it was a previous employee who's no longer there. I swear that they've said this every time that they've been caught doing this stuff. And it's just like, one of the weirdest parts about their response to this was that they didn't address it on like the Bungie account or anything. They addressed it on the official Marathon Twitter account, but that Marathon Twitter account isn't verified and isn't like associated with PlayStation or Bungie or anything. So, in the recent years, since the idiot took over Twitter, anyone can be verified, right? And that was a huge problem because you could just pretend to be someone you're not. You could, that check mark at one time, gave some kind of notification of this person is who they say they are and has some notability, right? But when that changed, when you could just pay for it, then they had to implement the system where like different colored check marks to verify people are like government officials or whatever. And then with like businesses like game devs or game like studio accounts, they can be associated with the main account. So if you look on, I want to say it's like Bethesda's account or like the Doom account right now or something, it'll have the Doom name, and then it'll have like their little check mark, and then beside that it'll have like the Xbox logo, because that Doom account is associated with Xbox, right? And you see this with a bunch of these companies. This Marathon account that addressed this stolen art issue doesn't have that. It's not, if you just looked at it, you would assume it was a fan account or like a parody account or something. But from what I can tell, it is the official like Bungie ran Marathon account. It's just for some reason it's not verified and it's not associated with Bungie or with PlayStation or whoever that, they would do their association with. So this sucks. Obviously, like I said before, this isn't the kind of attention Marathon needed. It already seems like it's going to be a pretty underwhelming game, and it just kind of has no juice, man. Like there was no like even when I played it, it was like, I'm kind of a weirdo who doesn't actually think that Bungie's gunplay is really all that unique or good, but it felt okay, I guess. But like the environments were like kind of pretty in a way, but especially outside, they were very bland. And it's that style substance thing I talked about. Like this game just has no soul to me when I was playing it. And beyond all of this flash that they have with this kind of sort of unique art style, which they stole at least partially. And then to me, always just looked like Apex Legends, but kind of more generic. So I don't know. This sucks. The way that Bungie's responded to it has predictably sucked. And there's going to be conversations for a long time if, and I assume this is true, Bungie was pressured by PlayStation to make this Marathon project instead of a Destiny 3 during this whole, what was it, Jim Ryan, whoever, during this live service push, which we're going to talk more about here in a minute. If that was the decision, whether it was made by people at Bungie or PlayStation or both, which is what I would assume, if the decision was made to make Marathon instead of Destiny 3, I have to imagine that will be a decision that will be regretted in the long run. So we'll have to wait and see. Jade Raymond, who's I know her from her Assassin's Creed days. She's, I believe, the creative director, was one of the original creators of that series, but who has kind of bounced around different studios over the years since then, is now leaving Haven Studios. This is a studio she founded, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago. It is a first-party PlayStation studio, and guess what kind of game they're working on? Their game is called Fair Games, which used to have a $ for the S and now doesn't, as they just kind of announced quietly. It is a dial up the, start the horn, start the band. It's a live service game. It's like a heist live service game. That I know, I think we saw it like a PlayStation showcase or something, but it was like so generic that I don't like, I do remember it, but like all I remember of it, of being like, what are they doing? Why are they making these games? Like no one wants these games. And so now their founder has left. This just reminds me so many of these other situations where, studio starts up, whether it's acquired or starts up organically inside one of these big publishers. It's headed up by this big name everyone's heard of, and then that big name leaves, and it's over, and they're gone. So kind of like Tango Gameworks, that made Hi-Fi Rush. They got, they were part of the acquisition to Xbox along with Bethesda ZeniMax. They put out Hi-Fi Rush, which was a big change for them. Their founder, who is known for horror games for the Resident Evil franchise, leaves after Hi-Fi Rush comes out. And then there's just no one left there of note, right? Like, I'm sure there are a bunch of really great devs there, but he leaves, the studio loses all their juice. Hi-Fi Rush doesn't really sell that well. Their previous games hadn't sold well, not since the first whatever that horror franchise, Evil Dead or whatever it was called, and then it gets shuttered. Now they did get purchased by another publisher, and I have zero faith at all that that's going to work out. But I hope it does, because Hi-Fi Rush was cool, and I hope we get another one. But this just feels like that, and it's just another tick on this. It's been bizarre, but this continually bizarre saga for PlayStation. It is. We're going to talk about PlayStation here in a little bit. They've sold almost 80 million PlayStation 5s, and that's all anyone talks about, because there's not a lot to talk about otherwise. They've had good games come out. There's no denying that. Astrobot won Game of the Year for a bunch of places last year, but didn't make any money. They put out, right when this generation started, they put out a bunch of great games. God of War Ragnarok, Ratchet and Clank, and all these, some of these games. Now, I think there's an argument to be made that those easily could have been cross-generation games. They weren't really PlayStation 5 exclusives, but they made them exclusives so they could eventually sell almost 80 million units of their console. Like, it was a smart move, even if it was kind of an artificial move. But in between Ragnarok and now, there's not been a lot. Spider-Man 2 came out and it was pretty good, but didn't blow anyone's mind, and it did okay. I think it sold pretty well as well, so good for them. But other than that, it's mostly been these third-party exclusives that they pay for that aren't permanent, that eventually will come to other, platforms, specifically Xbox. And it just kind of continues this weird decision-making where, obviously, before Jim Ryan left, that there was obviously, and it's so clear now, there was this big push for them to get a live service game, because they wanted that. Xbox actually has a pretty good live service game, presentations. All these third parties have that as well, and PlayStation doesn't really. And they kind of had it with Destiny 2, but that game certainly isn't as popular as it once was. And then now they're trying it with other games. It's strange. Like PlayStation is such an enigma to me. If you've listened to this show for a long time, you're probably annoyed with how much I talk about this. I'm truly not trying to do the console war annoying, like Xbox good, PlayStation bad thing. Like, no, they all have their criticisms, they all have their strengths for sure. But genuinely, PlayStation has dominated console gaming, at least between them and Xbox, for a long time. Even people always go back to the 360 and the PS3. You're like, oh, 360 did good. Not by the end of the gen, the PlayStation outsold it too. Even though they definitely buried themselves at the beginning of that gen with no games, and the price of the PS3 was hilarious. But they eventually caught up, and I think you can still make an argument that the 360 was the better console because of games, especially in services. But at the end of the day, they still didn't sell more consoles, even back then, and that's not the case now. So PlayStation has always dominated by having good hardware, great marketing, and good games, some of the best games, and they've been single player games. They've been shooter games or action adventure games, for years, and I still think now. It's been a joke that every PlayStation game is a sad dad simulator that's a third-person action adventure over-the-shoulder game. And that worked. And I'm not saying that's all they can do forever. That won't work forever. But it should probably still be their focus. And it's interesting that they've gone so far away from it that they seemingly are barely even trying to do that anymore. And that's weird. Like, it doesn't surprise me that they would try other stuff. That doesn't surprise me at all. But when you look at it and you see the way that PlayStation has been doing things like, we had Concord, which was another attempt at this live action service, this live service thing, with a new studio that, it came out, it was literally out for like 10 days. They shut it down and shut down the studio. And I don't want that for Haven Studios. I hope without Jade Raymond, that they can surprise everyone. Fair Games ends up being this huge success, that they can go on to make a bunch of great games, and everything's secure there. But that isn't the pattern. That isn't what's probably going to happen. And that sucks. And I don't blame Fair Games. I don't blame Jade Raymond for leaving. I blame this company that should, in theory, have the key to success, that just keeps fumbling it. And I think what frustrates me, and I complain about games media all the time, is that you see none of this reflected in the reporting on this. I feel like the reporting on Xbox is coming around a little bit, where it's not so negative as it once was, where no matter what they did, it was a negative article. I feel like things are coming around because they've been putting out good games pretty consistently in their services. The things that they've obviously been focusing on seem to be playing out. But the way that, like, you just see no, in my opinion, critical takes on PlayStation, even after years now, like years and years and years of what seems to be mismanagement. We finally have another Naughty Dog game coming, but they absolutely wasted resources and time on this Last of Us live service game that they supposedly worked on. What's Ubisoft? What's Sony Santa Monica doing? I'm sure they're making another, I would guess, God of War game. But then we heard rumors that there was some kind of live service multiplayer God of War game that they were working on, and that got canceled. Like, how many of these studios, seemingly all of them, did they distract and waste resources with and waste time with this, frankly, stupid attempt at getting their own Fortnite or whatever they thought they were doing? And it looks like it may not work out with a single try. The closest they've come is Helldivers 2, and that was made by a third-party studio that they own the IP of, and they published it. And it's very good, and it's still very successful. And it's almost kind of, I guess, funny in a way to realize that the only live service success they'll end up having was from a studio they don't even own, who is recently, and well, we'll talk about that. It's not even a first-party studio. It's not one of the studios that they've distracted with this attempt. It was a third party that they are licensing with. So, I mean, good luck to Jade Raymond wherever she lands. Good luck to Haven Studio and all the people who work there. And hopefully they can, make it work, I guess. But it doesn't look great. So we'll have to wait and see. Digital Foundry has confirmed Switch 2 hardware specs. I suggest going to their coverage to get like the absolute detail on it. The things I took from it, maybe being a little bit of a Switch 2 hater, or not a hater, but a little skeptical of it, is that it is using, and if you've listened to me long enough, you will know that for years now, I've predicted that the Switch 2 probably had finalized hardware years ago, 2-3 years ago, and that they literally just waited to release it until Switch 1 sales dropped enough. Because even 2 or 3 years ago, they were still selling a hilarious number of Switches. I think they crossed the 150 million unit mark fairly recently. Like, it's smart. It's smart business. I'm not dogging Nintendo for being smart, but it also meant that because they didn't know when they were going to release this, they prepped it years ago, and now the hardware is going to come out, and it's going to be dated day one. Which is frustrating because it's the same thing they did with the Switch 1. I don't think they waited. I think they tried to get that out ASAP because the Wii U was such a disaster that they got the Switch out, which obviously turned their fortunes around quite a bit. And that was outdated mobile hardware, like cell phone hardware. The day it came out, it was years outdated already. But it still lasted 8 years. They've sold a hilarious number of units of it with likely an extremely good profit margin. And they've sold a ton of games that they never discount on it. So it worked out for them, right? Just like it's probably going to work out with the Switch 2. But seeing that it's using what appears to be a 10 nanometer SoC, the chip that runs everything, the GPU and the CPU, it's tech from like 2016 or 17. that it became popular in like 2020, but that's still 5 years ago. And that's what they're using. Now, it does appear it's probably like a customized and upgraded version of that old tech, but it's still old tech. And the biggest thing being, what I think was really interesting, is that it's Ampere NVIDIA technology. So for the GPU side of things, which is it's what came out in 2020. So I want to say it's the 2000 series or 3000, is it even 3000 series? GPUs, I believe, were Ampere, which means that was the first generation that had ray tracing and that had, I believe, DLSS, but it's that old version of it. The old 2000 series cards can't run the newer versions of DLSS. That's why during the reveal of Switch 2 and a lot of the subsequent gameplay we've seen from it, it doesn't have DLSS in it yet. It's probably because it's either going to use one of those old versions of DLSS, or more likely, it's going to use a custom DLSS version that, especially third parties, but their first parties as well, are going to have to implement custom, I guess. And this seems like a very similar story as the PS5 Pro. So the PS5 Pro has this upscaling tech that they call PSSR, and we've since then learned that it's really AMD, another graphics card producer. It's their upscaling tech where that they call FSR, and PSSR is really just kind of like a hybrid of FSR 3 and 4, which is good. But it's, maybe not this super custom in-house built thing that they portrayed it as. It's kind of like a hybrid of their graphics card makers tech, which is what it sounds like the Switch 2 is probably going to be using with their NVIDIA, some kind of Nintendo Switch 2 specific version of DLSS that's likely basically going to be DLSS 1.0 or maybe 2.0. I can't remember what the 2000 cards could run. So, I mean, that's fine. Like it's still a good thing to have that tech, but it really just makes me just like scratch my head, which I didn't mean to do. But it is strange that they're just so willing to do this. I get why they are. That 10 nanometer chip, I think current day, I think even the PS5 or something uses like a 4 nanometer chip or something. The smaller it is, the more efficient it is. It uses less energy, and you can make more of them at a time in the manufacturing process. But they're more expensive, right? The 10 nanometer chip, which is ancient, this is like what they put in like cars and stuff to run their stuff, which is always way behind current tech. It'd be super cheap. This chip will be hilariously cheap for them to produce, which is probably why they're doing it to a point. But they're terrible on battery efficiency, which is why you've seen, I believe, the battery life for Switch 2 is like 2 or 3 hours, which is okay, but it's not great. It's probably not what people wanted, at least inside. They won't say it out loud because Nintendo fans can't complain about this stuff. But it's weird. It's strange. It's very weird to me. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be fine. They managed to keep the Switch 1 popular and selling games and consoles for 8 years, even though it was outdated. And this is a slight upgrade, I guess. It won't feel like it in 8 years when they finally replace it. And I don't know. It's weird. One thing I was impressed by, though, is it has 12 gigs of DDR5 RAM, which is really, really good. That's more RAM than the Xbox Series S has, which I believe has 8 or 10. I can't remember. So that's impressive. That will be really good. Like that will help that console a lot. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal in the long run. It's just Nintendo's weird, man, and they'll get away with it, and good for them, And if you're a Nintendo fan and you're perfectly fine with this, it comes out and you love it and you play it for the next decade, that's really cool. Like genuinely, good for you. It's just as an outsider who's tried to justify keeping one of these things and getting one of these things, I just can't. I can't do it. It just makes no sense to me. We'll see if my daughter can change my mind. Speaking of changing minds, Giant Bomb has been sold to the hosts. Jeff Grubb, Jeff Bakalar, Jan Jerome, and I don't think that's his real last name, but that's what I remember. And Dan Reichert, all people who were hosts on Giant Bomb for the last few years. Jan, I believe, is more of a producer. He is on some shows, but he runs everything in the background for them. They purchased it. They bought it from Fandom, the kind of big conglomerate venture capitalist company that buys a ton of gaming related companies. Um, we don't know what the cost was. We don't know how much they paid. I suspect it actually wasn't that much, but it was probably a lot for them. Like, it probably wasn't that much for Fandom. They probably just wanted to get rid of this and not have to deal with it, especially the backlash. But it was probably everything to those four guys. I swear I've seen that Mike Minotti, who's a GamesBeat journalist, maybe he was a contributor as well on Giant Bomb. I don't know if he was part of the sale or not. I tried to look. I saw conflicting info, so I'm not sure. But it was, but he's at least saying he's going to be involved in Giant Bomb still. They have it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Giant Bomb, because right now there's this groundswell of support. I'm sure their Patreon and their memberships on their website are probably popping off right now. It's super exciting, super cool. Whatever, like that's great. Problem is that website, the YouTube channel on its own, very likely doesn't make even close to enough money to support one person with their recent viewership. That will get a boost. It'll be a short boost, but they'll get a boost from all the good vibes, right? I'm sure their Patreon, I'm sure their memberships on their website probably make way more money than their YouTube or Twitch. But Fandom sucks, and everyone knows that. And their dealings with them sucked. But if they were making money, it probably wouldn't have been as contentious of a relationship. And now there's good vibes. We see Giant Bomb in private hands again. But we're probably going to be reminded why they were sold at one point and why they bounced around to different companies who owned them. And I'm willing to bet, and I think it sucks, that this is probably not going to last forever. I'm glad they're giving it a shot. I hope I'm wrong, even though I have some personal beef with them that only I care about. No one there has ever even thought about it again. So that's a whole different story. But it just goes along with what I talked about, I think it was last week, when they announced that they were shutting down or that things weren't going well, is that there's just, gaming is a huge industry. Games media wants to be as big, and it's just not. And it's partially because I think there's just only so much money for support or ads or whatever available. I think that the quality of work done in games media is just, I don't think it's great. I think it's pretty mediocre from top to bottom, with the very top being pretty good with like Jason Schreier and basically no one else doing like real reporting and not just commenting on rumors with hot takes, which is what most quote unquote games media seems to be. And then Giant Bomb has evolved into a thing where, like, I watched Jeff Grubb and Mike Minotti with their own podcast that they still do to this day, and they were both GamesBeat like journalists, right? Well, then Jeff Grubb goes to Giant Bomb with some other people, and then a bunch of people got laid off, which sucks. And those people aren't back, at least not yet, and they probably won't be, because this operation's barely going to get by, I think, for a while. And like, Giant Bomb's an entertainment channel. They definitely fancy themselves as games media, and they do some reporting, I guess. But they're an entertainment channel. They're not, it's not like a hardcore. They're not trying to be a VGC or a Eurogamer or anything like that. They're like a silly channel who does some news, and it's probably a better chance that works than a straight news channel. But I don't know. I'm really curious. I will put some of my own personal thoughts aside and genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, wish them the best. I would be surprised if this lasts more than a year. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. Genuinely, I hope I am. Moving over to the 2K CEO, Strauss Zelnick, which is just the coolest name. He claims that the GTA 6 delay was to try to achieve perfection, and that he does not anticipate any more delays. We'll see. They're always good for 2 delays from what I remember, even with Red Dead Redemption 2 and stuff most recently. But that's fine. That game looks insane. Grand Theft Auto 6 looks so cool that I'll wait. I don't really care. Like, it's just when it comes out, I'll play it. That's kind of where I'm at with basically everything. It is kind of interesting that along with this came a bunch of rumors that Red Dead Redemption 2 is being worked on to come out on the Switch 2. And my kind of joke, but kind of serious, is that they'll just release the PS3 or did it come out? Was it PS4? The PlayStation 4 or Xbox One version? Like maybe with a 60 frames patch if it can do it, but they still haven't even done that on the Series X or the PS5. Maybe it all comes at once. I don't know. But, considering the Switch 2 is around the same power as a PlayStation 4, actually a little bit less, but it has DLSS. I can't imagine it would be that insane for them to put it on there. It's just going to be an old version of it, which is the only version right now for consoles, at least. So we'll see what happens with that. Doom: The Dark Ages, my own first impressions. I talked about this game last week. It's scoring pretty well. It did I think it's like 85 or so on Metacritic and OpenCritic. My thoughts on it are, I played through the first chapter of it, which is mostly just an intro chapter. I get it. Like it's one of those things where I know there's people who like that type of game, and it does that so well. Like it's the best, right? At that, very arcadey, because people kept saying that this was like a slower paced game. It's, at least to me, it's not. And I just don't, it just isn't my thing. I like more strategic games. I like first person shooters. I just like slower paced things. And this game, it's so frantic, and the way you have to try to manage your ammo and your armor and your health and by doing certain things, and it's more manageable in this game than in like Eternal or the 2016, at least in my opinion. But I still it's just exhausting, and I'm not having fun. I'm just getting like mentally exhausted playing it. And like, oh, there's like moments where I'm like, oh, whoa, that's really cool. But for the most part, I'm just like, oh, okay, here we do that. Oh, I need to make sure I do this to get more health or ammo or whatever. And oh, I need to go find that key card, and I go find it, or the key or whatever. It's probably not for me. I don't plan on continuing to play it, but I get it. Like, I know that there's an audience for this, and for people who are in that audience, I get why it's being rated the way it is. I understood the same thing with Eternal in the 2016 reboot. I get it. Not for me, but if you're into these type of games, definitely check it out. One of the interesting things was I played on Series X, and it ran crispy. It was very perfect. No problems at all. Apparently on PC, at least for some people, there's lots of issues with it just running at all, or having to reload like pre-downloads and things like that. It seems like the issue seems mostly with the Xbox app version, but maybe that's just what we're hearing. But overall, it is strange that didn't get talked about more before release, because I assume some people played on PC. So it sounds like the issues may be fairly isolated, but big enough that you're hearing about it. So even in my own Discord, multiple people were complaining about it. So we'll have to wait and see if hopefully they fix that stuff up quickly. Hitting some of my final stories here real quick. Kojima says that internal reviews of Death Stranding 2 are even better than Death Stranding 1. Goodness gracious, who would have guessed that some internal reviews are really good for Kojima's next game? I will remind you, and this is the only comment I'll give on it, please remember that we were told that Redfall got like 8 out of 10 reviews in their internal reviews. So if you don't know what that is, it's where they normally contract a freelance games journalist, who maybe they're well known or not, to come in and do a NDA, like a protected review of their game. It's supposed to be independent. It's supposed to be like unbiased, but they're paying them to do it. They're bringing them they're giving them the special treatment. They're probably talking them directly to get the review. It seems like it's not a very reliable way to get feedback on your game, but maybe I'm wrong. I think Redfall, I think that's the game I'm remembering, that they were like, oh, it tested well internally, and then it comes out and it's like one of the worst games I've ever played. It's just, is what it is, I guess. And then Kojima also says that He has a USB drive that he's going to pass on to his studio with like thousands or hundreds of game ideas that they can try to fulfill after he's gone one day. So old Kojima's he is like 65, I think. Like, he's not young, like he's not old either, but he's not, he's not a spring chicken. He's being very, very thoughtful about his eventual passing. So Helldivers 2 Studio Arrowhead says that their next game will be 100% self-funded and 100% in their own control. They didn't come out and say it, but it sounds like it's likely going to be a multi-platform game. I still think it's insane that they still haven't released Helldivers 2 on Xbox. It would only help PlayStation. Like, it would only bring them more revenue. And it wouldn't even be seen as them putting like a first-party game on Xbox. It's a third-party produced game. They just own the IP, right? But it's PlayStation's gonna PlayStation. I can't believe that they haven't done it yet. I doubt they will. It's just, I really believe they are so scared of showing any kind of weakness to their customer base, who seems like very personally invested in the whole console war thing still. I think that they're happy to put Xbox games on their platform, especially when they're the top 3 sellers for whole months. But I don't think that they can do it themselves. So we'll have to wait and see if that changes. But I'm really excited to see what Arrowhead does next with Helldivers. That game I'm not as into it as some other people are, but it's a very, very, very good game. Very impressive. Microsoft is laying off 3% of their staff. It will impact Xbox. We've heard like nothing else about this. So I don't know. I'm not aware of any specific studios or people who have been let go, at least in the gaming side of things. No one's talked about it. This announcement came out. It was big news for like a day because it equates to like thousands of jobs. Microsoft is a gigantic company, so 3% is a big deal. And they did specify it would involve all departments, including Xbox. I haven't seen anything yet. I'm hoping it didn't affect anyone, but whoever does affect, hopefully they get back on their feet. Star Wars Outlaws has released their a DLC pack called A Pirate's Fortune. I checked it out last night. It was really cool. I love that game. I love that world. So more of that is cool. I hope to play more of that soon. I've seen rumors that that's the final bit of content for that game. That wouldn't surprise me because I anticipate the Division 3 starting full production soon, and that's the team that's probably going to work on that game. So right now we know that Ubisoft Massive, who made this, they're continuing work, I believe, on Avatar. They're still working on Star Wars Outlaws. They still have a team doing the Division 2 content, post-release. We anticipate the Division 3 begins production soonish. So I have to imagine that Outlaws team will drop down and do that. But then I'm also under the impression there's another game they're working on that's unannounced right now because of some people I know who work there, who aren't going to be on Division 3. I'm curious to see when or if we ever hear about that. Let's see here. Sony is considering a PS5 price hike due to tariffs. Of course they are. After Xbox did it, I'm sure they are going to do it as well. And them announcing that they might do it. Oh, maybe. Oh, we'll see. Who knows? That's 100% them trying to drive anyone who was considering getting a PlayStation 5 to just go ahead and do it. They're certainly going to raise those prices. There was recently the big deal between China and the United States where they both dropped their tariffs. I think the China's tariffs on the U.S. now are 10%, and U.S. Tariffs on China are now 30%, down from like 160 something percent. That's only a 90-day deal, and the problem is that there's no predictability with most countrywide leadership. There's predictability, or that they don't do things just on a whim, and they don't do things that take effect immediately. With this administration in the United States, literally anything could happen any day. And so, maybe we'll see Xbox drop their prices again due to those lower tariffs. Maybe we'll see PlayStation jump up their price ASAP so that people, don't realize that they don't have to do it, or at least not as big as they might do it. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's insane. So, and they also announced that they've sold over 77 million PlayStation 5 units. Pretty impressive. Good for them. And then Stellar Blade is coming to PC. So Gooners Unite. You can finally mod what appears to be one of the most mediocre stories in the game ever, with some good gameplay and just the most generic big boobied women you've ever seen. You can get them boobies out, I guess, on PC. We'll see how long it takes people to mod that. It's probably already modded. I did see that they are still restricting that game in like 120 countries for some reason, even though it doesn't require a PlayStation login. PlayStation's strange, man. Beyond all the other stuff I talked about, they seemed like they were kind of getting into the PC side of things, and then everything they've done there has just continued to be kind of a crap show. Like they just don't seem to take it very seriously, and they hamper the product on there a lot. Not to mention that they wait for their first party games sometimes 3 to 4 or 5 years to put them out on PC after console. I don't know. I don't get it, but they're the ones making all the money. We'll let them keep doing that. As for content updates, the only thing I really have this week is I did start a new YouTube channel. It's called Baunfire Archive. It's where I'm going to put all of my stream VODs, mostly from Twitch, but if I ever stream on YouTube, that's where they will go as well. I hated how cluttered my YouTube channel was, where every time I'd release, maybe I would stream a couple times in a row, and I'd put those VODs on my YouTube channel, and it would get to the point where like all of my YouTube videos were just VODs, and I didn't think it looked very good. If someone clicked on my channel, I didn't really want them to watch those. If they want to, that's cool. So I started a different channel just to keep those there. Not really because I think people are going to watch them, but more so because Twitch deletes VODs. And I don't know, I want to keep that stuff. I think it's kind of a neat thing. So I saved as many as I could. I threw them over there already. And then any further streams will get posted over on Baunfire Archive. So if you want to go subscribe to that channel, I would appreciate it. And that's where we're going to wrap this one up. So thank you for listening to this episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Leave a review on Spotify or iTunes. And subscribe to the Baunfire YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as a YouTube member or Twitch subscriber. If you are interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, comment on Spotify or YouTube. Let me know in my Discord, or hit me up on social media at Baunfire or at the Baunfire. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So, until next time.